Welcome to Frequency. I'm Chuck Gose.
And I'm Jenni Field.
And Frequency is your go-to for real talk about comms, culture, and employee experience beyond the buzzwords and straight to what matters. And Jenni, I do want to share a couple things that do matter to me. This is really bad audio, but good video, I guess, for people that are watching this on YouTube. So if you're listening, watch this on YouTube. I've made a change to my shelf behind me. And for anyone who hasn't seen me on camera, it's a little chaotic behind me, but everything has a story to it. There's a reason that there's a Savannah Bananas pennant behind me. There's a reason that there's a stuffed gallbladder behind me. But I've decided on a shelf over my left shoulder, I'm now calling it my friend shelf.
Nice.
And so on this friend shelf are all the things that I'm proud that my friends have created on there. So a lot of it's books. And if you can see this, I don't know, when we trim the video, let's see. If you produced a hard book version of it, they can stand up. So they're standing up. So your book is right there. Alan Arm is there.
That.
If it's paperback, they're laying flat because they just don't stand up that well. But I kind of like my new friend shelf that I can point to anytime I'm on camera.
I like it. I have lots of shelves behind me. They're mainly books, but I do have some shelves on the other side, which you can't see so much, that have photos of some of my best friends and some stuffed hippos and some other strange collection of things that I've been given over the years.
I noticed you don't have a Very Hungry Communicator book behind you though.
I don't.
Jenni, I've noticed. So anyway,
I need to get that.
Not that you need to. So anyway, I just thought I would point that out. On a previous episode, we talked about you doing a sham of a LinkedIn poll around change fatigue and strategy fatigue. And I was very excited earlier in the week that it was exactly 50-50, which I thought was hilarious that it was 50-50. Then somebody goes and votes for change fatigue and ruins my fun. However, it does make it 52% believe more in change fatigue, 48% strategy fatigue. You're the one that thought this up. I'll give you a couple seconds here to explain yourself.
So after the episode where we talked about is it change fatigue or is it strategy fatigue that organizations are going through, I wanted to see whether people were aware of that difference. And actually in the comments, there was some quite good discussion about the fact that there's so much strategy fatigue that it's leading to change fatigue. And that some people were recognizing that they were different. Some people were saying one leads on to the other. But it started the conversation. And that's really what I wanted, was the conversation around that language and just making sure that we're not sort of getting sucked into the latest buzzword of, oh, it's change fatigue, when actually it's a much bigger issue of a strategy challenge, which needs a lot more attention from the leadership than just saying, oh, we're just changing so much. So I'm okay with kind of an almost 50-50 split because it was the conversation that I wanted to have more than anything.
I was a little surprised at the results. I thought strategy would come out ahead, but I'm also quite excited that given that I was change spice and that you were strategy spice, that change spice won.
Marginally.
Before we were, hey, a win's a win, Jenni. Before we started recording, today we record on Thursdays, I had the glorious opportunity to spend time at the BMV. Some of you in the US might call it DMV. And I'm curious, Jenni, does that make any sense to you whatsoever when I say those words?
No.
Okay.
I feel like DMV does, but I don't know why.
Okay. No, I was just curious because this was going to be my line of questioning you. So the BMV/DMV, depends on what state you live in, is the Bureau or Department of Motor Vehicles. So this is where you go to like renew your license, register your car, get plates, whatever it is. I find it so funny that everybody complains about going to the BMV or DMV, different than how they compare going to like the post office. Mm-hmm. So being the Midwestern dad that I am, the place opens at 8 a.m. I get in line at 7:30 a.m. because I want to be first. So I was in pole position, pat myself on the back. First one there, got right in. I was out of there by 8:08. Like 8 minutes later, I was completely done with the transaction. I compared this to my experience at the post office. Like people just like to complain about it. So before you go and make some flippant comment. I want to find out, like, what do you call the BMV or DMV over there?
So we don't have to go anywhere. Everything's online over here. So what are you going to do there?
I mean, it's mostly on. I mean, some of it's online, but when you purchase a new car, like you have to take your registration paperwork to
all
there.
done through the mail.
Oh, well, so there's nowhere to go.
No.
When you take your driving test, where do you go for that? Where do kids get their
Well, you go
licenses?
to a test center to do your driving test. And then I don't know what happens after that. But my niece turns 17 tomorrow, which is very exciting. So she'll be out having her first driving lesson. And so eventually she'll take her test. And then I can report back and let you know what happens, because it's been a significant amount of time since I did mine.
It's interesting. Yeah, I was curious about that. As I was going to the BMV, I was like, I wonder what Jenni does. And I guess you don't have to actually go. Yeah,
no, I think you can do some stuff at the post office, but the majority of stuff is through the mail. And doing it
Good
online.
For you all.
But my flippant comment was going to be that you said that you were done in 8 minutes, but you got there at 7:30. So you actually
clock starts at 8 o'clock.
I don't think that's the rule. If you're going to get there early, that's how long. That's how much time it took you to get that task done.
Yeah, clock starts at 8 o'clock. Jenni,
I like it. I'm just not having it. I'm not having it.
One of my observations as we record episode 4 is that we use the word interesting a lot, which I think is really good. But I wonder, are we using it too much? So this is my challenge for us this episode. Can we go the rest of the episode without using the word interesting? So as I pass this along to you to get into your articles you've prepared, that's our challenge for this episode.
Okay. My caveat to that is that if I'm quoting somebody or something and they say interesting,
that's a loophole. Yeah, I hear you.
That's fair. You. Okay, right.
Okay.
So the first article that I was looking at this week was actually a video clip from Marriott CEO talking about DEI. And the sort of the headline on it was, the next day he had 40,000 emails from his associates. But as I watched the video, I grabbed what he was saying. And I think this DEI piece is really important for organizations looking at culture. And that's what I wanted to kind of kick us off with today. So what he said in that video was, it was interesting the day the executive order came out. I sat with our senior leadership team and I said, given the industry leading position we have, we ought to make sure we're all aligned on not only the philosophically how we think stuff, which is the easy part, but what are the words we use? What's the language we use that we should talk with the board a bit? So I said to the team, let's take the weekend, let's get together in a week or so. Fast forward from that, he went off to Los Angeles to a big industry conference. And while he was there, they did a CEO panel. And one of the first questions in that was around this executive order linked to DEI. And this is what the CEO of Marriott said. I thought about what I'd heard from Bill Marriott all those decades. And what I said in response to those questions is that we've been around for almost a century. Political winds blow all different directions, particularly when you operate in almost 150 countries. But there are some fundamental truths about this company that have guided us for those 98 years. We welcome all to our hotels and we create opportunity for all. And fundamentally, those will never change. The words might change, but that's who we are as a company. And I loved this because I think it stands to everything that we always talk about. But my question is really that we've seen so many organizations respond differently to this. And it's I don't want to say it's a tricky topic, because that doesn't feel like it either does it enough justice or doesn't. But I think it's something that people aren't really talking about very much. And that's why I wanted us to talk about it. But we've seen organizations, which is really leaders, like rather than just give it the non-human lens. They've all made lots of decisions in the last few months. Some big brands have closed programs. They've made really big stances in the opposite direction to what we're seeing from Marriott. So I wanted to sort of start the conversation of, do you think that's because they don't know their values and their purpose? Or do you think it's something else and they're just following the political winds, as it were?
Yeah, I think political winds is the perfect word to use here, that it's like as soon as that first gust blows in, they cower to that direction. I think it's a sign of weak leadership. I was excited to see that video from the Marriott CEO. This is coming someone who is a loyal Hilton Honors member. I was excited to see the CEO of Marriott speak out about it. And this is why I think it's important is when you talk about the executive order, you're pointing to the Trump administration's executive order where they tried to basically blame everything negative happening in the world on diversity, equity, inclusion, which we all know is a joke. And there was an article that I shared in the past month in Ecology that talked about how 82% of Americans are supportive of DEI. 8 out of 10 Americans are supportive of DEI. So it doesn't reflect how people actually feel when the administration takes one stance and leaders follow that stance instead of listening to what their employees are saying. However, of those 82%, only half think that other people actually believe in diversity, equity, inclusion. So even ourselves believe less than what we believe. I'm going to avoid that word that we're going to talk about because it almost came out of my mouth. The 40,000 emails. Let's be real about this. Do we know that it was really 40,000? Is that a rough number? I don't know. The point is there were a lot of emails that he received. He didn't read them all. Guarantee you, he did not sift through all 40,000. So we don't know where those 40,000 people stood on it. I think the key was whatever he said elicited a response from employees, which is a positive sign. When you take a stance on something, that's going to get a response from people. If you're wishy-washy, people will ignore you. So he was not ignored in his stance, which I think is an amazing thing from a leadership comm standpoint. The good here in this for me is that he's representing employees out there with strong, compassionate, and thoughtful leadership. That's the signal back to employees. And when you look at a report that we're going to be talking about later today, it's the opposite of that, where they're saying like half of all CEOs say they may scale back diversity, equity, inclusion efforts, which to me is also weak. They're not even taking a stance. They're just like, well, we'll see. I mean, I don't really know. And from a US standpoint, when you look at the two polar opposites of what's happened at Costco and Target made all kinds of sweeping diversity, equity, inclusion changes, and their stock price took a hit. You could debate all day long whether or not those two things are related or not. Costco took a stance saying, no, this is important to us as an organization. Their stock price took off. Again, correlation, causation, whatever you want to point to. People do care about this. And my challenge back to the comms world is stop using the acronym. Start saying the words diversity, equity, and inclusion. And saying like, oh, do you not want our company to be diverse? Do you not want this to be inclusive? Do you not want equality for everyone? So then we have to start using those terms because that means more than just saying the acronym. I loved his point of pointing back to the values of we welcome all, we create opportunity for all, foundational core values, awesome. It did feel a little weak when he was like, well, kind of whatever you call it. That's now this weird little murky area that leaders are in is publicly they're removing all this stuff from websites, but behind the four walls of the company, they're like, no, it's still important to us. We're just not going to tell everybody else it's important to us. So I love the stance. I love his passion around. I love him opening up and talking about this publicly. My hope is that it encourages other leaders to have a spine, build a backbone, stand up for their employees, knowing that this is what they believe in. My other part of this, I love now that TikTok is a news source for me because I saw this on TikTok the first time this video came out. So that's my diatribe on it.
Yeah. We can so often get bored of our own sort of language or our own messaging, whereas actually those two fundamental things for Marriott don't need to change. Like they can just stay the same, but it's almost like we need something fresh and new to do something, but they're fine as they are. They don't need to be anything different. they can stay the same. And I think that need for something to be new and different sometimes lets us down. So I'm with you. I just thought this is so great to see leaders making decisions based on their values and their purpose, and also loved that he had involved the whole leadership team and said, let's take some time to go away and think about this and come back and talk about what this means, because I think that's important, not to just react, but to take that time to think, reflect, discuss, because not everybody can move quickly, not everybody wants to move quickly. And I think that's so important, to just pause and get lots of different perspectives from around the table that are hopefully diverse, and then move forward. So really liked it. Also love that TikTok is a news source for you. I love that I had to reply and went, I don't have TikTok, so I had to go and find it on YouTube.
I think the other thing to think about is from the consumer side of this. Yes, we spend a lot of time talking about the employee side and what that means. Think about this then from the consumer side of knowing now where Marriott stands on there. And people they're traveling for work, vacation, whatever. They have choices. And I think this is a very savvy move for him to represent the employees, represent the brand, and tell the world this is where Marriott is. The fact that we welcome all, we create opportunity for all, that is now going to stick in my head every time I'm at a Marriott hotel. So
the next article I want to talk about isn't really an article, it's a report that has come out from a company called Axios HQ. And they have surveyed over 450 leaders across the US. And alongside that, they've also surveyed about 800 or more than 800 knowledge workers. So people that predominantly work at a computer, essentially. So different industries, different organizational sizes, different roles. And they wanted to do this report to find gaps in alignment between executives and employees and how they affect the operations of the organization. They had a look at three things in there. So the three things that came up were areas of investment over the last 18 months and how they impact performance, employee perspectives on what would help them feel set up for success in a tough year, and those gaps in alignment. They were kind of the three things that they looked at. But the report suggests some key questions for the year, and it also suggests some areas to highlight for communication professionals. So the report is about how can communication teams radically strengthen the business this year. So the two key questions are, why is hybrid leadership still so hard? It's a question I ask regularly. What are successful organizations doing right? And the highlights that it comes up with are the four areas where communication teams can help is in stronger alignment, stronger engagement, stronger performance, and stronger growth. Now, the alignment piece is the bit that I found really interesting. I talk about that a lot. And I know, Chuck, we've talked about engagement being a misdirection for comms people. And actually, is it really alignment? But what stood out for me was this huge disconnect between what leaders think and what employees think about communication. And the question they asked was, the communication that leaders at our organization send to employees are helpful and relevant, clear and engaging, timely and reliable, easy to share feedback on, and easy to find when I need it. Now, there's a range here, but leaders sort of rank that between 72 and 80%. So they think they're smashing it. Whereas employees have said it's between 46% and 53%. So leaders think maybe, under a third aren't having a good time with their communication, whereas employees are saying, actually, no, it's more like half. So whilst this isn't necessarily new, my question for you, Chuck, is the gap feels bigger than ever. So where does this responsibility lie for this conversation? I know this report was aimed at communication professionals, but where is that responsibility? I'd love to know what you think about that gap, why it's so big, and maybe what you think people should be doing to maybe close that, whether whoever's responsibility you think it is.
When a report comes out like this, Jenni, do you know the first place I go to in the report?
Where?
To the back. Immediately go to the back. And this is what I found interesting about, I just said the word, I just dinged myself. This is what I found exciting about looking at the numbers in the back. It's important to see the size of the companies that were being interviewed. So Quick math, a little under half are from organizations smaller than 500.
Nice. Okay.
Comms looks very different in organizations 500 and smaller versus thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands. Still important, but comms is very, very different. And then also 61% of the leaders interviewed or surveyed were from that group of 500 or smaller. The reason I think this is worth paying attention to is you would typically think then, okay, smaller companies, the communication's going to be better. That gap should be a lot smaller because it's easier to reach those people than if you're in the thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands. So I think the problem is worse than even the numbers show, because we weren't talking about companies that are in the enterprise level and global of tens of thousands. Might have been some in there, but I think statistically somewhat probably insignificant. I would always think smaller organizations, some of them were even, it's at 11 to 99 employees. That's a pretty small company. Again, many great companies are of that size or 500 or fewer. So it's not to diminish that. But a lot of times companies of that size do not have comms professionals in them. Someone else is doing the comms. So that might also speak to the gap. I think the thing that I would pay attention to if I was in comms here is looking at these investment numbers that they talked about, that leaders see that investment in comms pays off. Those that are investing in comms, it pays off, and not in softer things like engagement. These were things like market share, reputation, customer retention, business revenue. That's where they're saying, oh, we invest in comms, that pays off. That's what you take to leaders. Those are the data points that they are going to care about out there. And when you talked about the alignment thing, where even the leaders believe that only, a quarter of the teams are fully aligned with the business. That's not a comms problem. That's a leadership problem. Because 10% of employees think they're aligned. Whether you're looking at the 75% number as misaligned or the 90% number misaligned, neither of those are good numbers. There's a story I want to share. One of the data points was that half of employees said they can't find critical goals. You could point to that as saying, oh, that's a comms issue. I think it's a different level of comms issue. There was a company I did this project with years ago, and I was like, okay, what are your top 3 goals for the year as an organization? And they rattled them off. And one of them was, we need to increase random acronym by 5%. I was like, great. That's something we can measure against. I'm not from the business. What does that acronym mean? And they were like, we don't know. We don't even know what that is. And I was like, okay, well, what does 5% mean? Like, again, they're like, we don't know. I'm like, so what does that doesn't mean anything to an employee. So not only do they not know where to find them, they might even know what they are or what they mean. That's where comms can step in. It's not so much a comms issue, but that's where comms can take a leadership position and say, let's educate our employees on this. Does that mean I use less paper at the printer? Like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do to help the company achieve these goals. That's where comms can step in and lead on things like this. I think the other part was talking about how half of employees admit they are doing the bare minimum. You can look at that in a couple different ways, because are they only doing the bare minimum because they don't feel like leadership cares about them? Are they only doing the bare minimum because there's no point in them going above and beyond? That's apparently what we look at for engagement, employees going above and beyond. I don't think any company probably feels great about half of their employees just doing enough to get by. Again, not a comms issue, a leadership issue. The other part that, from a leadership standpoint, again, I love blaming leaders for these problems. I get such joy out of it. That leaders said their biggest key or obstruction or whatever to communication is making the time to communicate. Fingers pointing back at you. Make the time. You've laid out how it's important. You've laid out all the great things that can happen as a leader when you communicate and you're saying, well, I don't have the time. Well, then that's back on you. Make the time. Everybody has time. You're just choosing how you want to spend it. Make the time.
It's really interesting listening to your take on it, because I don't love blaming leaders for this stuff as much as you do. But I like the fact that the conversation is, this feels like this report has the wrong name. Like, this isn't about how communicators can help businesses succeed or whatever it was. Like, this is about, fundamentally for me, this is a leadership issue, and it needs, skills, investment, development, time in looking at leaders' communication skills, because so many of the things that you've highlighted and that are in the report aren't something that a communication team alone can fix. And this, I think, is the challenge for the internal communication function, certainly this year, but I'd say in the last maybe 18 months or so, where it feels like anything that's going wrong in the organization is just being lobbed into the internal comms team, because all routes lead to relationships, communication, which I've always believed, but communication teams can't fix these problems. There's so many things that they're being told they can fix when they can't. And this is why when I looked at the trends at the start of this year, there was like over 40 or something that people were saying were the trends for the year, which was just ridiculous, because it's like everything, because it's become so much. And I think that's the challenge, is so many of the things in this report are not for communication teams. And I think, and that was, I've just gone back to the title of the report. It was 4 ways communications can radically strengthen your business. So it's not necessarily aimed at communication professionals, but I think it felt that when we were reading it about this is where communication can help. But maybe it was more about this is how improved communication in your organization can do this, not necessarily this is how the communication team can help you do this. And to your point of predominantly 500 people or less, they should have an internal comms person. I always say anything over 150 is your tipping point. But I've worked with organizations that have had 7 employees, and I work with organizations that have 90,000. There's no difference in that communication when the leadership skills are not good enough. So even when there are 7 people, the leader has to be a really good communicator in order for that to succeed with 7. So it doesn't matter how many you've got. That's the bit to really work on.
There's a lot of really good insights in this report, which we will link in the show notes. We could do a page-by-page review of this. There's a lot of good topics to debate. So Axios, if you're listening, throw some money at us, sponsor this. Let us go do.
We'll do a special.
We'll do a special episode because it's good for communicators to understand this data, where it's coming from, and the insights from it. So that how do you then apply that stuff? So yeah, I know we want to keep moving along, but it is a good report.
Yeah.
It's just understanding who's the best person to, what does that data mean for you as a comms professional versus a leader?
And the thing I'm really passionate about is any data and insight that is looking at a leader's perspective and an employee perspective and a communicator's perspective. So anything that's bringing kind of the business outcomes into that conversation is where I want to have the conversation, because that's fundamentally what it's about. So I think we've ignored that side of things in so many industry reports for so long that it's just refreshing to see more of that data coming in, because I think that's where things can really shift. So I've got 2 more articles, things that I wanted to talk about this week. One is around the pressure of personal brand online. So somebody posted they posted a post on LinkedIn about the pressure to post on LinkedIn. I feel like I've just said post about 1,000 times. But they were talking about how does everybody find the time to build a brand, to show up consistently online, because it can be quite exhausting. And I know we've joked on here that we spend too much time probably on LinkedIn, but that's in part because both of us are building communities. That's where we spend a lot of our time to talk to people in our communities and networks and things. But I think there is a line for people inside organizations, and I'm wondering where that line is and why there is now so much pressure for anybody working in any role to be visible on social media. And it's a conversation that I have with friends every now and then. So I was chatting with some friends the other week. We're a group of 6 friends who have been friends since school. And we don't get together very often, but we were chatting the other week we were out for a friend's birthday, and we are a mixture in this group of mothers and non-mothers. We're teachers, assistants, managing directors, creatives. There's a real mix in here. And in that friendship group of 6, there's also a real mix of social media use. So I obviously use it a lot because I have the business and my brand and speaking and all of those things. But some of my friends in that group aren't on it at all. So I'd say it's almost kind of 50-50 between people using it and people not. And I said, as we were chatting, I'm not sure I would post so much if I didn't have this business and my brand and the speaking and all the stuff I want to do. I'm just not sure I would post so much. So I suppose my question is, has the world evolved to the point where everyone needs to post online and everyone needs to be visible to get a job or to be promoted? Or is it just that we've been sucked in by marketing and society at large to feel like we have to, when in fact we don't have to at all? And for me, it's just a conversation that maybe isn't had all that much. And I just wanted to get your take on it.
Yeah, there's no commandment out there that says thou shalt have to be on LinkedIn, or it's a choice. And what I think was interesting, there it is again, intriguing about the post that you talked about is, comparison is the thief of joy. And so there are people like you. I will argue, I do not believe I spend too much time on LinkedIn. I believe I spend the adequate amount of time to accomplish the goals that I want to accomplish out there. However, I have a Facebook account, but I do not spend any time on Facebook because I get no value out of Facebook. I probably have a Pinterest account, but I don't use it if I had to set one up at some point to do something. So it's, where do you get value out of it? And if LinkedIn is not your place, then don't spend time in that place. If you see other people doing lots of things on LinkedIn, it's because they are choosing to do lots of things on LinkedIn. That does not mean you also need to make those same choices. So to me, it's a little bit of like a little bit of vanity check on it. There's a little bit of a creativity test yourself on. I mean, there's a lot of really bad, bland, boring content on LinkedIn. I try to at least be a little more creative and just see, like, where's the priority for you? If LinkedIn is not it, then enjoy seeing what other people post. If you don't actually enjoy that experience, then don't spend time on LinkedIn. I compare this to a little bit like a gym membership. If you are out and about and you see people who look really fit, really healthy, and they spend a lot of time at the gym, but then you also don't want to spend time at the gym, then you can't be critical of those people who do that, because that's where they're choosing to spend their time. If that's what you want out of life, then you will find a way, or you will try to come up with a plan for you to do the same thing. If that's not what you want, then good for them, happy for them, you be you. And I thought the post was a little peculiar in this vein of not woe is me, but more of like, oh, these people are doing all these great things and I don't know what I'm supposed to do with it. And I'm like, well, maybe you're not supposed to do anything.
It made me feel a bit sad. I was like, oh, I don't want people to feel like they have to. And I do talk to a lot of people when I'm coaching people, if they're having any careers coaching or anything like that, where they've got this real pressure to build a personal brand. And I was like, I don't know why you feel you need to do this. I know loads of consultants and freelancers and people that work inside organizations who are doing phenomenal work and really successful, but they don't post consistently on social media because their relationships are in different places. So I just don't think we should feel like we have to. And I think sometimes that pressure can be a little bit unnecessary for.
I was talking to one head of an agency, and another consultant mentioned this consultant's name. I was like, man, I haven't seen her in years. Where is she going? They're like, well, she has some clients that she's doing with, and she's kind of just doing that and doesn't need to announce everything that she's doing. And I'm like, good for her. That's not me.
Yeah.
Like, that's just not good for her. I'm glad. I'm glad that works for her. That's not what works for me. So that's the point, is just find what works
Yeah.
for you. What do
Yeah.
you enjoy? Now, LinkedIn has risen to the top of when you talk about career growth or jobs or whatever, that is a pillar
Yeah.
of that. There's a lot of SEO. If you search people's names, that does rise to the top. So yes, that does matter. So if those kind of things are very important to you, LinkedIn is a great place to do it. It is not the only place, but it is a great place
Yeah.
to do it. Now, the trap that I fall into when it comes to LinkedIn is when I'm looking upward and I'm seeing all this amazing content that other people are creating, and I'm thinking, man, how are they doing that? And I'm like, oh, they have a team of people. They have an
Yeah.
army of people doing that content. I'm a team of one. So I even have to at times reset expectations
Yeah.
that's where I can aspire to be, but I'm not going to be that yet or ever without
Mhm.
a team of people in place. So I do think there's always a little bit of
Yeah.
self-checking and self-regulating that comes into play.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. So the final article that I wanted to talk about was one that was in the Harvard Business Review. So I got very excited, I think, when we recorded last week that I had the Harvard Business Review magazine arrive. I was then even more excited when the second magazine arrived, because I've only recently resubscribed to it. I got two of the magazines kind of in one go. And the most recent magazine has an article in it about what people got wrong about psychological safety. Now, this is a term that has been used in organizations for years now. It's gained a huge amount of traction with leaders, with HR, communication professionals. But in the last, I'd say about 6 months, in the conversations I've been having with HR and communication teams, I've had a few HR professionals say to me, I don't like that term. I'm not supporting that term. We don't use that term here. And nobody could really articulate why. They just really didn't want to use it. So when this article popped up in the magazine, I really wanted to read it to find out a bit more. And we're not going to talk about the whole article. We'll put the link to it in the show notes. It is behind a paywall. So I'm happy to share some of the key elements to it. But the 6 misconceptions are outlined in the article, and that's the bit that I really enjoyed. So there are 6 misconceptions that people have got wrong around psychological safety. The first is that it means being nice, which isn't the case. So if you tell me in your organization that you don't argue, or it's like a family, then that for me is always a red flag. It was a red flag when I was working with a leadership team back in 2018. Like, that's not what we want. It's not about being nice. That's not a good thing. The second misconception is that it means getting your own way. So it's definitely a case that just your view shouldn't always prevail. It shouldn't be the one that wins. The third misconception is that it means job security. So people have said things like, I shouldn't be being laid off because it's not psychologically safe. So somehow that's got merged together. The fourth misconception is that it requires a trade-off with performance. So somehow it's become that you're either psychologically safe or you hold people accountable, or there's accountability. But it shouldn't be either of those things. They can work together. The fifth is that it's a policy. There's an example in the article about actually, I think, an act coming in a certain state in the US around being a psychologically safe place, but you can't mandate for psychological safety because it's like trying to mandate for trust or motivation. You just can't do it. And then the sixth misconception is that it requires a top-down approach, whereas actually to create a psychologically safe workplace, everyone has to do that. And I'm often talking to teams where I'm saying you can behave differently. You can behave in this way, and you can kind of model that behavior. It doesn't have to be told from the top. It doesn't have to be everyone doing it. You can start that. And there were a couple of quotes from the article that I just really liked. But the one I want to mention here is about kindness. So there's a quote in the article that says, psychological safety is entirely consistent with kindness, but let's distinguish between being nice and kind. Nice is the easy way out of a difficult conversation. Kind is being respectful, caring, and honest. And I loved that because it reminded me of Brene Brown's work, where she always talks about to be clear is to be kind. And I just think it's so important to not messy up kind and nice. And if you're saying we're really nice around here and it's a very nice culture, then it's time to move that over to kind and do some work to unlock that. So I know you've had a chance to have a look at the article, but I just wanted to know what the views were, maybe with people you're talking to. Like I said, this has been something for me where psychological safety has been that sort of dirty word in a few conversations. And I just wondered how it was kind of going down on your side of the pond, or whether it's something that everyone's still talking about, and just getting your take on it, really, whether it's everywhere.
Yeah, I think it has become a bit more prevalent with the current political climate here, what's happening in the job market, what's happening with layoffs. I do think that's come up quite a bit. For me, the nice thing is intriguing, because in a message to Ecology members this past week, I talked about we think of right and wrong as being opposites and easy and hard as being opposites, when I actually think right and easy are often the opposites of one another. There's always an easy way to do things, and there's a right way to do things. And the nice is the easy way. Kind is the right way. So I think that's a key part for people to think about when it comes to this. My question to you, Jenni, and this simple question: do you enjoy roller coasters?
No.
Okay. I love roller coasters. I grew up riding roller coasters. Someone else wants to sponsor us. Kings Island in Cincinnati, Ohio was my babysitter growing up. Spent way too much time at amusement parks. I love roller coasters. To me, that's what psychological safety is. So if you got on a roller coaster and the lap belt didn't quite work, or the harness didn't quite come down right, you'd probably flag somebody down and be like, I'm a little uncomfortable here. This is not safe for me to be. And when you think about what a roller coaster is, it actually, when you describe it, it doesn't sound very safe, but it is, because it has the lap belt or the seat belt or the harness, and it's been tested and all these things. So you still get the joy, you still get the experience knowing you're safe. Now, if you're someone like me, you don't let them push the harness all the way down. You leave a little gap in there so you get a little rise up out of your seat when you go down the hill, because you like to feel a little bit more of that danger. But to me, that's what psychological safety is: knowing people can enjoy it and be themselves in that candor and still be protected. And that's, I think, the nice part when people talk about that with their culture. That to me says, oh, people are getting stabbed in the back, or they're getting talked about behind themselves. That's not that might be a nice thing to do on the surface. That's not a kind thing to do. It was surprising to see that there is a state attempting to legislate psychological safety. I could get behind this if it was more like, hey, here is our understanding of the definition. So as companies apply this, this is what we mean when we say this, not your own interpretation of it, as we've seen now with diversity, equity, inclusion conversations happening. So maybe this is their response to, hey, this term is now out there. It's being used in lawsuits. It's being used in layoffs. We actually need to define what this means. That could be the case. It's not surprising that someone's trying to legislate it, but maybe that will work out for them. So it is coming up. It is important. It's important at work. It's important outside of work. I think it's great that this term is out there for people to think about, because there is physical safety. You know, that's something I talk about in the realm of psychological safety, and that given my size, people can't see this if they're watching on YouTube, I'm a larger human than most out there. I'm not worried about my physical safety most of the time. But I also recognize for other people that is a weekly, daily, constant concern that they have in the back of their mind. So I try to put that in perspective with psychological safety as well, that there are people that it just is constantly on their mind of, can I be myself? Can I say this? Can I act that way? Do I dress this way? All, to me, that's all part of that. And if you work at a place that is psychologically safe, or you're in a family or a domestic unit that is, then you can take a sigh of relief. You can be yourself. And if you're not, you're always going to be on edge, not being your best self.
I can see why there's been the frustration with it in terms of the use of it without the meaning behind it. And I feel like it could go down a similar route to employee engagement, where it's become this sort of phrase, but no one's really talking about what that really means and what that really looks like. So I just think the article is very well timed. It's also co-written by Amy Edmondson, who wrote the book The Fearless Organization, and she's a huge expert in this space based on her research and everything else that she's done. And I think making sure that people are clear about what it is just so important, because it's an easy phrase to latch onto. It's a bit like when people say to me, we've got a culture problem, and we figure out you've got a credibility problem with your leadership. This is the same. People are coming to me and saying, oh, we've got a psychological safety problem. And I'm saying, no, you've got a leadership problem. All routes lead there. But it's that challenge.
I do think you like pointing fingers at leadership after all.
I like to highlight the areas of opportunity, and then I want to help them. I don't just want to start ringing a shame bell at them, which is where I feel like you could.
Though that might get the right result sometimes. Though I think you should give that a go.
Shall I do that? Shall I?
What can we learn from Game of Thrones about psychological safety?
There's a segue. But it's a good article. So we'll put the links in the show notes. If anybody has a subscription, they can go and check it out. So that brings us to the end of our article review, and now an opportunity for us to talk about what we're freaking out about this week. So what are you freaking out about?
So it hit me this past week that within about a 4-week period, I will have 3 different trips to Canada this summer. So the end of May, I'm going to be attending and speaking at a Blink event in Calgary.
Nice.
Then the first weekend, or I forget how the weeks go, I'll be in Vancouver for IABC World Conference. Mm-hmm. And then fingers crossed, I'm still invited to Comms Reboot in Toronto at the end of June. And it got me thinking about, like, is that going to look suspicious now with the way US-Canada relationships are, that I'm doing like 3 trips in, basically a month time frame? And I was thinking, like, it'd be really great if there was like an email that I could send to Canada's customs and be like, hey, Canada, just so you know, these are my plans. And this is where I'm going to be and why I'm going to be there. And it's all good. Like, it just got me thinking about how international travel has now changed with this new presidential administration, and how you're thinking about visiting other countries differently that I would have never thought about before, especially even just Canada.
Yeah.
Like, for what is it that the US-Canadian border is the longest, both in time and distance, like peaceful, unmarked, no fence border in the world. And we're now in this weird thing like, oh, is that going to look suspicious if I'm going to Canada? That just got me. I'm a little freaking out about it. How about you?
I am going to join you on your freak out about travel, because I am obviously coming over to Toronto for Comms Reboot for the 25th of June. But I've also got some plans to be over in the US later on in the year, which aren't quite firmed up yet, so I can't talk about them, but it's very exciting. And people have sent me articles now about how you can get stopped at the border in the US and have your phone checked. And if you've said anything bad about the administration, then they won't let you in. And they will like go through your phone and check it. And we've never had any concerns about traveling. Like, it's never even entered my mind that I wouldn't be allowed in somewhere, because I've got my passport, I've got my visa, I'm very, I've got all my rules. I've done everything right. That all of a sudden there's these articles that are a little bit frightening, and a bit like you, it kind of makes you go, oh, what do I need to think about differently that I haven't ever had to think about before in going to countries that I have visited, been lucky enough to visit a few times, that now feels a bit more tense. And I'm aware of my privilege in that I've always had that privilege of feeling like this is going to be fine. So it's a little bit unnerving, and I need to make sure I've got all my visas and documents and all of that. And that just makes my hands go a bit clammy. So I don't enjoy that at all.
Somebody who's never done anything wrong like that, every time you go to a custom desk, you feel guilty.
Yeah.
Or a border desk, you feel guilty. I remember one time I was traveling through Heathrow, and they're like, oh, do you have anything to declare? And I'm like, no. And he's like, oh, well, when was the last time you were here? And I'm like, man, I don't know. Like, you got it all right there. Like, And even little things like, well, how long are you here? And I'm like, I don't know. Are we talking days, nights? Like, does today count? Is the departure date? Like, people are already, it's a stressful situation at times.
Yeah.
And now there's this added layer of stress. And I'm also seeing this happen with companies, intra-company travel of
Wow.
employees who maybe are in Canada, but would normally visit the US, their offices. They're like, F it. I mean, it's not worth the hassle of doing it. And so I'm curious then to see what sort of impact does that have on business of people just not, where before they would have never thought twice about Canadian going to the US or American going to England or wherever it is. Now they're like, not worth it.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see. Well, fingers crossed, we both have good, safe travel and can get into all the places we need to get to this year. And fingers crossed for everyone else as well. So that's it for this week. Thank you for joining us. All of the articles that have inspired this conversation are in the show notes. And don't forget to rate and review after you've listened as well. Subscribe so that you don't miss another episode, and pass this along to someone that you think would enjoy listening or watching, because you can now find Frequency on YouTube. Thank you to Poet Ali for contributing the music to the show, and we will be back next week with more news, insights and opinions about everything comms and leadership in the workplace today. Keep tuning in and keep turning up.